So today, I'm calling my entry Stockholm Syndrome. And I'm not talking about it from the standpoint of a psychologist or an analysis of what it means, but more from what it meant for me and what it still means for me, and how most people think of Stockholm Syndrome, was someone who was captured like Patty Hearst. In fact, I remember very vividly when Patty Hearst was captured and how people were saying mean things about her, and that, it was all a big fake, and that she really was with those people that took her, and that she really was in love with the guy. And then we started hearing about this thing called Stockholm Syndrome, and I knew when people were saying mean things about her, I wanted to yell at them, no, what she's saying is true and real, because I knew it for myself. And when they started talking about Stockholm Syndrome, it really was an eye-opener for me. Let me just read you some definitions of Stockholm Syndrome really fast. It happens when hostages or abuse victims form emotional bonds with their captors. Symptoms: affection for, attachment to the abuser, attempting to help the abuser, distrust or anger towards those trying to extract them from the situation, rationalizing abuse, feeling powerless. Those are some of the definitions, some of the things associated with it that I can tell you from experience fit me at a certain point in my life. This picture is of my high school graduation picture, and only 2 years before this, I was 2 years younger than this, and look at how young I was when I became involved in a Stockholm Syndrome situation. I was the summer of my freshman year of high school, and sophomore is when it began. And before I get to the beginning of it, maybe a little bit of history on me. I grew up in a very rural Indiana town on a lake, and I never really fit in. I think the first time I went to grade school, I was terrified. I just felt like I had stepped into another reality that I didn't like and that I wanted to escape from, and that I couldn't. But I still had the lake. I'm going to show you a little thumbnail of this. This is the lake where I grew up. And the lake was kind of, I think of as my mother, really. That's where I spent all of my time as a kid. And, starting to go into my teens, I would swim all day. I would be with my dogs. I would go for walks in the forest. And that's what my reality was nature. And here's the moon. I used to go for walks even at night. You could smell honeysuckle during the summer, and I would walk and sit out on this point and just look at the moon and the moon on the water. And I was just a very kind of a loner child, and not unhappy, even though there had certainly been very bad things that happened to me. But I found this happiness in nature and in lots of things. So um, although I was a frightened kid, I'd say, I was also a happy kid. And I don't know what about that combination attracted the person that I attracted. Um, I know that he liked what he thought of as the best things. He always had the best stereo, the best motorcycle, the best weed. He was in the best band. So somehow, as I grew up and grew prettier and started attracting lots of boys, I guess I became kind of the best in the town that we lived in a way that drew him. I really, when I discovered boys, it was like a whole new world for me, from being in school and being, sitting in corners and feeling alone. Boys liked me suddenly, and it was like having a magic wand. Like I could wave it, and boys would come my way, and I loved kissing. The way you do when you kiss when you're young and you go to parties and people pair off in corners and neck and make out, and that was just like a magic carpet ride to me. It was just like a trip, and um, it was all fun, and I guess it wasn't fun for other people. And it started becoming less fun when boys got mad because I didn't want to kiss them anymore, or girls got mad because I was kissing the boys they wanted to kiss. And I had no concept of any of that in an ego like way. Like, I wasn't trying to make girls jealous. I wasn't trying to hurt boys' feelings. I just don't think I had any more sense. I really just thought it was fun, and I didn't realize the ramifications. But I think it set me up again, another part of the setup for what happened. And of course, the earlier part of the setup was my family itself, the father of darkness that I spoke of in one of my last videos, and I guess what you would call my mother of fear. Two people who, didn't teach me about how to have a good relationship or how to set what we would call boundaries nowadays, or what real love was or real caring was. And I think when you have had a father like I did, a father of darkness, it really opens the door more easily to more darkness because you're used to it. And this is a photograph I took once of the water down a stream that I lived near, and it made me think of my ex-husband, the tangledness and the swirls and the darkness. It made me think of him. So how I met him, I lived on the lake that I spoke of, and his grandmother had a cabin there. And I was out walking one day, as I often did, and he and his friends were out there, and they started yelling at me. So immediately it started with this kind of humiliation or attempt to kind of degrade you in order to make you feel they were better than you. They would yell at me things like, "Oh, Blondie, hey, hot pants, think you're better than anybody," things like that. And it really kind of scared me. and I would just keep on walking like I didn't hear them. And, it would go on only when they were there, and I would almost not even want to go for walks, but that was too important to me, and so I did. And then one day they yelled, "Hey, come on up here. Are you too afraid? Come on up here." And so, I was interested in boys, and these were boys, and they were even older boys than I'd been kissing. And so I went up there. And I just don't remember how I ended up on a, quote, date with him. I remember that he was the oldest of them. His younger brother was one of the guys, and he was in college then. He was a lot older than me. And, he was this kind of brooding, dark guy that was in the background. And I don't know how I ended up with him over at my mom's house one day. All I remember is how the day ended up. And he and I were sitting on the steps outside talking, and it was hot out. And I had a glass of water, and I was playfully saying, "Do you want to cool off?" And that I would, pour it on his head. And he looked at me with the angriest eyes and said, "Go ahead. See what happens." And it kind of took me aback. I had just been being playful, and he looked so mad. And at that point, I still had enough of myself left that I poured the water on his head, and he got up and left. And I think that, of course, is one of the major hooks for someone who had my childhood. Leaving is frightening. Leaving means, when my mother left me, there was no one between me and my dad, and that was deadly. So leaving was scary to me. So that's our first date. I don't remember how we got back together. I remember that the shouting started back up again when I went for walks, and it was even worse. And that finally again, and I don't remember how, they got me to come over. And he and I started talking again. And this time, he kissed me. And I vividly remember he picked me up and sat me on the kitchen counter and said, "Do you know how to kiss?" And well, I thought I knew how to kiss because I'd kissed so many boys and I loved it so much, and I smiled it and said yes. And he said, "Well, let's see." And he kissed me and told me every single thing that I did wrong and demonstrated for me what I did wrong. He said, "Look, your mouth is too tight." And he took my cheeks and squeezed them hard and slapped them a little. "Loosen up. Loosen your mouth up. Loosen your face up. Your lips need to be loose when you kiss." And he went down the line as to how I didn't know how to kiss, and I was just too young and just a little girl, and, maybe he could show me how to kiss, but I certainly didn't know how now. And I was so humiliated. And I remember running home crying and him laughing. Again, the beginning, humiliation, making you feel young, stupid, inferior to someone who is superior to you and knows more, and both threatens you and promises you some kind of, "I can save you. I can make you okay. I can make you know how to kiss. I can make you acceptable." That's how it began. And from that point forward, I don't know how I began to be with him again, but I was with him on a more, regular basis. And he began very soon pushing to be sexual, to have sex. Had I had sex? Did I know what sex was about? If I wanted to be with him, then I would have to have sex, because that's what a real relationship was about. And older girls at college, lots of them wanted to have sex with him. And if I wanted to attract him and have him stay with me and have him be with me, then I would have sex with him. And I didn't want to, and I didn't like the idea, and I wasn't ready for it, and I kept, putting it off and putting it off, and finally he was to the point where he was just ready to move on. And I remember also during this period, he had begun the campaign to alienate me, which is again part of Stockholm Syndrome, from everyone else. He told me that, being in a relationship, being in love meant you only were with the other person, and you certainly never talked about the other person to anyone else, and never told them what went on between the two of you. And I was a silly kid, and my friends were silly kids, and all I needed to be with was him. And in fact, he knew about the things he heard about me in high school, and that I was a slut. I was, showed my ass off in my cheerleader skirt, and don't think that he didn't know everything that I said, that I did, who I was with, what I wore. He knew everything that went on in high school. And I said, how? And he said, I have my ways, I know. And then I would find out that he actually did. Like he would come home from college on a weekend, and he would know the color of the sweater that I wore, and that it was too tight, and that I was showing my boobs off, and that I wore a dress that was too short, trying to show my ass off, and who I sat next to in a convocation. And of course I was obviously flirting with this boy because I was a slut, and constantly always threatening to leave me, to the point that I got so afraid of any boys looking at me, any boys talking to me, anybody talking to me, that I began wearing clothes that were not attractive anymore. And I always looked down, and if anyone tried to say hello to me, I wouldn't look at them. I wouldn't say hello. I would act as if I didn't even see them. I even remember a teacher once trying to talk to me in the hallway. Things seem like they're changing with you. You don't look the same. You're not wearing the same clothes. If you'd like to talk to me, come to my office anytime. And I just looked down and walked away from him. Because my fear was mounting and mounting. Because the ultimate threat was, if you do this again, if I hear this again, I'll leave you, I'll leave you, I'll leave you. And I never stopped to think why that scared me so bad. I wasn't in love with him. I didn't even like kissing him. But at some point, it was as if my life depended on him being in it. Somehow along the way, he convinced me of that. And I guess I was already convinced of that, as I said, from my childhood, where I think with my dad, it felt like if I didn't make him happy, or if I did talk about what went on, I could die. The darkness in him was so deep and so frightening, I felt like I could die. And with my mom, if I didn't make her happy, I think I felt like, she would stop being in between me and my dad. She would leave me, and then I'd be alone, and then I'd die. So I really think I associated being left with death. And so I grew more and more cold and more inward and more dependent on him, and more afraid of him leaving me. And later on in life, one day I was walking in the marsh, and I literally saw this picture of a rock that's shaped like a heart, frozen in the ice. And I took a picture of that. I had it framed for a while because that was how I felt at some point. My heart was like in ice. It was like, there is a level of hell, the ninth level of hell, that is ice. And people can't talk and they can't move. And that's how I became with him. I was frozen. And, I didn't talk to anyone with him or the people that it was okay for me to talk with when I was with him. So, as I said, he was pushing sex from a really early time, and I didn't want to have sex with him, but it became, clearer and clearer to me that to keep him, I was going to have to. And I vividly remember the night it happened, that I was still not completely afraid of him enough. And I was at this dance with some friends. It was in a church, used to have these dances for kids. And he was away playing in his band, and I was just dancing. I always loved to dance. And all of a sudden, I felt this hand on the back of my shirt grab me and turn me around. And I'm looking into his face of fury. And then he turns and runs out the door. And I ran behind him, begging him to stop. And he yells at me again that I am a slut. He never wants to see me again. He knew the minute that I was gone, I would be back to, being with all the other guys. And I was crying and begging, please stop. No, I wasn't doing that. I was just dancing. And he stops and glares at me, and I say to him, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. I'll have sex with you. I might not have used those exact words, but that's what I conveyed. And we went to his grandmother's cabin, and I had sex with him. And it was awful. I didn't know what it was supposed to be like. No one had ever talked to me about it. And he, I don't know, it was a horrible experience. And I went home, and the next day I went for a walk, and his friends were out there again, and they were making fun of me and laughing. And I knew he had told them what had happened. And I went up there, and he said to me, boy, if you didn't know how to kiss, you really don't know what to do in bed. You're supposed to move around. You're not supposed to just lay there like a, stone. And, he wasn't even sure I was worth it hanging around. It would take so much to teach me. But, and I had told him I'd never had sex before, but then, why was there no blood? Why wasn't I, what a virgin is supposed to be? There must have been somebody else. And I remember again running home crying that here I had done this thing that I thought would mean so much to him and that had frightened me so much. And instead, he threw it in the trash and stomped on it. And so that was how our relationship continued. And it went on and on. And I think, sex was this constant, became a threat to me because it was so horrible with him. I never enjoyed it once, and it always felt like something I had to do to please him. It was the ultimate way to please him. If we were in the car together and he was driving and I wasn't performing oral sex on him, then I was being a big drag. And he would even say to me, well, I wonder, I would have to ask it. I would have to suggest it. And if I didn't, he would say, well, I wondered how long you'd go before you, did this. You're just so frigid. He called me frigid for years. After that, I became frigid. And so I don't know why he stayed with me. Sometimes I think it's because even though I, begged him to stay with me, and the thought of him leaving frightened me, and I would do anything he told me to do, even when it was things that I hated, like being in the bathroom of my mother's house and her being out there in the kitchen cooking, and him making me have sex in the bathroom with him. And I still wonder how she could not have known what was going on. But anyway, no matter what, I think that there was some part of me that he never got to. He knew I didn't like sex with him. He knew, I think probably, that I didn't love him. And I think maybe he stayed with me all those years because he still wanted to conquer whatever that part was in me. He wanted to smash it. He wanted to kill it. I think he was both attracted to me and hated me. Like, I was a happy person. He wasn't. And I think one time he said to me, he was really drunk or high, one or the other. He was always high. He smoked weed constantly. And he said, you're like one of those little Easter chicks, that you used to be able to get at the dime store for Easter. Like, I want to pick you up in my hand, and you're so fluffy and cute, and I want to squeeze you. And then I just want to squeeze you so hard that I smash you. And I remember just feeling my blood chill. And I knew what he meant. He hated me. He wanted to kill me. And I still stayed with him. And in fact, I married him. And I won't even talk about that day and the horror of it and the horror of our honeymoon, which was just a night in a hotel at the college that we went to because he was in pre-med and we couldn't leave and go anywhere. And, I still cannot completely explain at all. It still is a mystery to me. All the years of therapy and all the understanding of Stockholm Syndrome. And I still don't completely understand. It's almost like I wonder sometimes, did he have a book? Did he know exactly how to make me frightened and insecure and dependent? I know that the other two girls that he dated before me when he was in high school actually tried to commit suicide when he left them. And I wondered, did he purposely do it? Did he purposely know how to make people become frightened and dependent? Or was it just like a natural part of his own fear and his own way of existing in the world? And I don't know the answer to that to this day. But I do know, like I said, we went to college together and we lived together the first year my parents didn't know. I had an imaginary roommate, and college was like a bright spot in my life. It was like this blasting open into freedom that I hadn't felt in so long. It was only intellectual freedom. I mean, it didn't end up being like friendship or love, but it was just so amazing to me to. I was a classics major. I was just immediately drawn to that, and I just, he would be gone with his band on the weekends, and I would sit at my mom's house on the back porch and read, Homer and Euripides and Sophocles, and just like, oh man, it was just such a wonderful time during such a horrible time. And he never even knew about it. I never talked to him about it. If he had known about it, he probably would have made me stop and start to take science or something. But anyway, we went through college together. And, it wasn't just the sexual constant use of sex to intimidate me. And he liked to hurt me physically, sexually, and I could not complain. Or he would again tell me that I was just a baby and there were girls that liked this. And, it wasn't just sex. He did other things to kind of bind me to him or frighten me. Like, I remember one day he went to his grandmother's house. He knew when she was gone and he had a key to her house. And he went in and stole money from her while she was gone. And I had to sit out in the car and keep a watch out for anyone coming to honk the horn. And I felt so ashamed and so frightened. And he stole things from other people that I knew about. And I don't know. Just the thought of all those years of being with, really a sociopath. He had no conscience. I never saw him feel guilty about anything. The only emotion I ever saw him have was anger and, jealousy, if that's an emotion. But nothing he did made him feel guilty. I don't know how I survived it. And even more, I don't know how I left it. But I'll tell you how I did. When I got to the end of college, he was in his first year of medical school. And I wanted to stay in college and get my PhD and teach. And he didn't really think that made any sense. He wanted me to be a lawyer because his plan was for us to go back to, where he lived, and he always wanted to buy his parents' home that his father had let go to ruins, and he was going to fix it up, and we were going to be this, great couple that everybody envied, and I was going to be a lawyer and he was going to be a doctor. So I, who had never had any desire to go to law school, went to law school. And, what's funny is that was the beginning of the end. And at law school, it was very hard to isolate myself the way that I could in college. In college, you don't have to make friends unless you want to. You go to classes and you can kind of just remain anonymous. And but in law school, I was in the same room with the same people day after day after day. And there was a big like atrium or big room where, when we weren't in classes, people would sit and study or talk or have lunch. And I would sit over by myself studying and trying to look boring, wearing gray corduroy pants and, a turtleneck. And not looking at anyone. And this woman kept coming over and trying to talk to me. And she was from New York City. And she was like just such a colorful character. She wore a bandana around her head and smoked cigarettes and had that great New York City accent and just was so vibrant and, just, I don't know. I don't know why she was attracted to me, but she wouldn't let it go. I would try to answer her questions briefly and then, go back to studying. And she didn't give up. She kept coming over. I don't know if she knew something was wrong or if she really just liked me. But she started saying, "Why don't you come for a beer with us after class?" And I would always say, "No, I can't." And she would say, "Why?" And I would just say, "I can't." And she would ask it over and over and over. And the, refrain would always be, "Why not? Why not? Tell me, why not? Why don't you want to come?" And I think after a while, this combination of being around this woman who felt so wild and so free and so fun with her sparkly green eyes and her freckles on her little nose, and who kept saying, "Why not?" I think I started hearing those words, "Why not?" Why not? Why not? And I have become, such a Stockholm Syndrome wife that those words never occurred to me. Honestly, when I was with him all those years, I never thought about how bad it was. I never thought about it. I didn't think about how painful it was, how much he hurt me physically, the threats he made. I didn't think about how frightened I was. The only thing I ever thought about was not losing him. And other than that, I think he started getting tired of me a little bit and would, leave and go away with the band on the weekends. And I could just, like I said, sit and read my books or, go for walks with my dog and, have the little joys that I still had. And so I never really thought about it much. I just, drank wine and listened to music when he wasn't around or went for walks or, did the things that I enjoyed. But now I had this voice that was saying, "Why not?" And so finally, at this point, he was doing his internship and, he would have to stay nights at the hospital sometimes. And so there was a weekend that was coming up that I knew he was going to be staying overnight. He had told me. And this friend of mine had asked me to come to a party. And so I thought, well, he'll be gone. And, why not? And so I told him about it. And of course, it was a nuclear explosion. I knew it. I knew it. Even after all these years, you're still a slut. You're wanting to go to this party. I know what you're going to do there. If you dare go, you'll be sorry. I'll make you sorry. Just the total atomic, explosion. And I'm leaving right now. And, when I come back, I expect you to have come to your senses. And, that's that. And he left, and I was terrified, and I kept thinking, I don't know. There's something wrong here. And he came back, and he said, "Oh, you know what? I don't have to do my internship this weekend, so we can go down to the lake," which he knew is what I loved more than anything. And so let's, get ready and do it. And I said, "No, I'm going to go to this party." And he said, "I'm going to the lake. And when I come back, if you don't follow me, and if I find out you've gone to this party, I will leave you." And he slammed out the door. and I was in a cold sweat. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was terrified, but something was pushing me, pushing me, pushing me. I don't know, some inner part of me that wasn't dead yet was pushing me to go to this party. And my friend came by and got me, and we went to the party. And I was just kind of sitting there on this couch watching people, like, like I was in a foreign world. People were laughing and talking and drinking and smoking weed. And I was having a couple glasses of wine and taking a few hits of grass. That, certainly that was something I did all the time, so that was nothing new. He smoked weed constantly. But anyway, it was just like I was in Disneyland watching people laughing and having fun. And so this guy, who was one of my classmates, sat down next to me and, handed me his joint, and I took a hit off it. And he leaned over and he kissed me on the lips. I mean, he didn't know I was married. And it was like an explosion went off inside of me. I mean, I know years later I compared it to when Snow White or whichever of those Disney characters swallowed the poison apple. Like, it was like when she sat up and the poison apple fell out. It was like, boom, I woke up. I remembered that a kiss could feel good. And I kissed him again, and I kissed him more. And we ended up in a bedroom kissing, and I realized, whoa, I cannot do this. And I said to him, listen, I need to stop. I'm married. And he said, whoa, okay, I didn't know that. And we left the room, and I found my friend, and she was ready to go. And we got in the car together, and I said to her, listen, I want you, when we get back to my apartment, I want you to come in with me, and I want you to help me get my clothes and a few things. And I need to go somewhere. I need to leave because I'm leaving my husband. And she said, what? I mean, she knew I was married, but, she had no idea there were problems. I mean, she probably did have some idea, but she didn't know what I was doing talking about leaving. And I looked at her and I said, if I don't leave right now, if I don't leave this minute, I'll die. And she said, okay. And she came inside with me, and we got some of my clothes. I got the fewest things I could. I got my clothes, my books, and I left. And we went to her house. She lived with her parents at that point. And there was a little apartment downstairs that nobody used. I think one of her brothers was going to use it when he came from New York to where they lived. And anyway, so I stayed there that night, and I stayed there for a long time. And I never looked back. And I don't remember exactly how I told him, except that it was over the phone. And I said, I've left and I'm not coming back. And, I don't even remember what he said. I think he was in shock. And of course, there were lots of threats. And some of them were of bodily harm, and that I wouldn't live to, be able to enjoy my sluthood or whatever. But it was a horrible period in one way, and it was a great period in another. The horrible part was that I couldn't tell anyone why I had left him. I mean, literally, I couldn't. I had no words. I didn't know why I'd left him. I couldn't tell myself why I had left him. I couldn't think about what went on between us. It was all like a mystery to me. I didn't know why I had left him, except that, like I said to Monica, and I even forgot that. It was just that once I'd left, man, I was down the path of partying. It was like I was a wild animal who had been let go off its chain. And, you know, woohoo, I was the slut that he talked about. I was, boozing, partying, and in bed with every guy I could find. And that went on for years. I think it was like a way to try to come back to life. Maybe not the healthiest way, but I did come back to life. But the bad part was, like I said, not being able to explain to my family. They kept asking me why I'd done this. Had he hit me? Had he cheated on me? And I would say, no, I didn't know why I'd left him. I just had to, which was not an acceptable excuse. And he played upon that with everyone. He was having a nervous breakdown. He was going to have to take even a leave, possibly from medical school, because I had broken his heart. How could I do this to him? Everyone hated me, all of our friends. My parents even were very angry at me. And in the midst of it all, my father had a heart attack and died. And that's a whole story, other story. But I do remember being at my father's funeral and the minister walking down the line, shaking the hands of the family to comfort them. And when he got to me saying, your father worried so much about you and wanted you to go back to your husband. It meant so much to him. And I think he worried so much. You may be the cause of what happened to him here. He literally said that. And he said, I hope that will make you reconsider and go back to your husband where you belong. Fortunately, it didn't. And so, like I said, I went my way of recovering, which was partying. I think I'm probably the only person that ever partied their way through law school. And I don't really think, here's me. This sums me up for the next many, many, many years. After law school, practicing law, when I moved to Washington, D.C., the party just kept on rolling. And I only dated guys after that didn't really want me. And I didn't do that, like, consciously. I didn't say, oh, I'll choose this person because they don't want me. But I didn't want to be wanted again. I didn't want to be the object of obsession. I didn't want to be close to anyone. My heart was that frozen stone that I showed you earlier. I just associated relationship with a nightmare. And I don't think that began to change until I reconnected with, the core of me. I realized that, like, all this dating, all this screwing around, all this partying, this was when I was in D.C., was not making me happy. I finally realized that, and I didn't know why, but I knew it wasn't. And I came across this ad about, I knew I wanted to move from the apartment I was in, and I was looking through the city paper, and I came across this ad that said that 360-degree view of wetlands in the Chesapeake Bay. And like this little, bell rang in my head, and I thought, I want to go see that. And I did, and this is what it looked like. And this is what it looked like. And I think that, my heart started to thaw. My true heart started to come back to life. And the bay and all of the magic of the bay and my connection with water and my connection with the moon and the connection that was me before I met him, that loved being outside and loved nature, I started to, get back to those roots. And it took a long time. This is another image that I made of nature and the kind of joining between it and the feminine and the, joy of that for me. So it took years and lots of therapy and lots of healing. And I will say that I don't think I've ever recovered from it and probably never will. I've never been in a true relationship since him. I lived with someone for half a year during law school and with another guy for like a year and a half after law school. And I really did care about him. But, we ended up parting, and that was really it. Since then, I've never lived with anyone. I've always kind of enjoyed being alone, and I did heal over the years, and I continue to heal. And but, I don't know that, at age 67, I'll ever have the relationship that I dreamed of when I was younger. And, that's okay. I've had a different kind of life. This is another portrait. This is about me. A friend of mine who is an artist made that, and I did model for her sometime. And that is the picture that I call she's out of the cage and not going back. Not going back. But she's still sitting on the cage. And I think you could kind of say that is me. I got out of the cage and I never did go back. But I'm not sure I'm ever completely free of it either. But it really is okay because it's made for a different kind of life and a life that has had much richness and much joy. And, being in a partnership would have been wonderful, I'm sure, but I just led a different kind of life, and it probably led to a deeper understanding of me and a deeper appreciation of myself and an ability to be alone and be happy that way. So there's no need to feel sorry. This isn't a sad story. It's just a story. But it is a story that shows what can happen from early wounds that aren't healed. And I will also say that my husband was not the end of people who were sociopathic or who were like them. I had other go-rounds with those people. I still was susceptible to it. Not in a relationship as in with a man, but with other relationships, with a person that I worked with a couple people that I worked with. And I would also say with my current landlord in the house that I live in. And in fact, that's what started me thinking about all of this. Started, as you might remember if you listened to my video, Father of Darkness, started me thinking about how many of those people have come and gone through my life because of that door that stays open because of my childhood. And I think this last go-round with this person whose home I am living in, who isn't my father, but you would think so, I think it is helping me heal yet another layer of that, such that I'm hoping he will be the last of the Father of Darkness figures that comes through my life. That's it for today. and I hope I'll see you again.